So now we have the grey steering wheel. So what do? We pull down twice and we see that autopilot is enabled. I put on the turn signal, and without me doing anything or disengaging autopilot, it changes lanes automatically. Hi there, and welcome to TechPlower, and welcome to my car. We are sitting in my 2021 Tesla Model 3. I hope you watched my traffic-aware cruise control video. But in this video, we're going to go through how we use Autopilot and also navigate on Autopilot, which is part of the enhanced Autopilot package. So first of all, what is Autopilot? Well, Autopilot is kind of an extension to traffic-aware cruise control. Autopilot will do as traffic-aware cruise control, keep the distance to the next car and keep the speed that you have set, but Autopilot will also keep you in the lane. But you still have to keep your hands on the steering wheel for safety. There are some limits to Autopilot. It won't do roundabouts, it won't stop at a red light, it won't stop at a stop sign. It's basically traffic-aware cruise control with lane assist. But how do you use it? There are some settings for Autopilot, so let's go through them first. So, as usual, to go into your settings, you click the car icon, and then we have an Autopilot menu. So here you see also traffic-aware cruise control, but we have enabled auto steer, which is the autopilot functionality. And here is an option to set how we activate autopilot. I have it set to double pull, so pulling down twice on the right stalk will enable autopilot. We also have this option here, navigate on autopilot. This option is part of the enhanced autopilot package. And what this does is that if you have an address entered into the navigation system, the navigate on autopilot will automatically change lanes for you as well as keeping you in the lane. It won't do right or left turns on crossroad or stop at red lights or stop signs, but it will change lanes for you automatically. So let's enable that because I want to show you that later on. And here we can customize navigate on autopilot, let it be enabled on every trip you start. And then we have a setting called speed-based lane changes. There we can set how aggressive the autopilot should be in the lane changing functionality. If we go further down, we can set the speed limit that the autopilot is set according to the speed limit on the road. I usually have it as fixed, 5 kilometers per hour above the speed limit. You can also set it as a percentage of the speed limit, but you can also just set it as the current speed. So I usually have the speed limit and fixed and 5 kilometers per hour. And that's it for the settings for the autopilot. So on newer Teslas that don't have the stocks, you enable autopilot by double clicking the left scroll wheel or simply single clicking depending on the settings that you have set in the Tesla settings. Instead of just talking about this, let's show you how this works. Let's start with autopilot. So when do we know when we can use autopilot? Well, on the screen here you will see a grey steering wheel when you can enable autopilot. So let's watch for that, and it came up right away, but let's wait to enable it until we get out to the road. There's a car coming and it was not going to let me into the road, but we just did it. So now we have the grey steering wheel. So what do? We pull down twice and we see that autopilot is enabled. I can let go of the accelerator and you see that the steering wheel is now blue. And it's set to 5 kilometers above the speed limit as I've set in my settings. And I can actually take my hands off the steering wheel and the car will steer. But if I don't put my hands on the steering wheel soon again, the car will complain. So I always keep one hand on the steering wheel at all times when using autopilot. So autopilot also works as the traffic-aware cruise control and will lower the speed, as you can see, when cars in front of me lower the speed. But the difference is that when on autopilot, when the speed signs say that there is a lower speed, the car will actually lower the speed. It's actually strange to see that the max speed is not lowered, because usually Autopilot lowers the max speed according to the speed signs, but it doesn't do that now. Maybe that changed in some update. You see that there's a blue circle around the 50 sign, so maybe that's indicating that we are going over the speed limit. Okay, and you saw that there, that we had some strange markings, and the autopilot didn't handle that well, so I had to take over. So that's why you always have to keep your hands on the steering wheel, even though you're using autopilot. So we can enable it again, keeping our hand on the steering wheel, and the car is struggling a little bit here with the turn lane, but figured it out. And back on the road, trying to be in the middle of the road, figured it out at the end. And now, since I had to disable autopilot, the max speed is 75 because the speed signs say 70 kilometers per hour. So it seems like the car in front of us is a little bit too close, but now going further away. But now the car will slow down a little bit because the car in front of me is slowing down for some reason. So now let's see what happens when we come out of the construction zone and the speed increases to 90 kilometers per hour. So while on autopilot, it should increase the speed according to the speed sign and also lower the speed according to the speed signs, which is different from the traffic aware cruise control where it doesn't do that. And now you also see, while on autopilot, you have these blue lines on either side, which you don't have when you have only traffic aware cruise control. So both the blue steering wheel and the blue lines on each side indicate that autopilot is active. So let's see here, the 90 sign is approaching. What will autopilot do? And now we get 2 lanes. It wants to go to the leftmost lane, but I didn't want to do that. I'm not sure why it's not going up according to the speed signs, but if I lower it a little bit, I can show you that you can also press the speed sign on the screen to increase the max speed for the autopilot, which is really handy. Then you don't have to scroll up multiple times to get to the max speed. So I'm not touching any accelerator or brake. I'm just keeping my hand slightly on the steering wheel to let autopilot know that I'm here. And you can see it slows down for this Nissan Leaf, which is driving quite slowly here. And what I cannot do, I cannot change lanes now with autopilot unless I disengage it. So if I do like this and try to switch lanes, autopilot disengages. You don't see the blue steering wheel, neither the blue lines on the road. So that's also a difference between traffic aware cruise control and autopilot. You can change lanes with traffic aware cruise control, but not with autopilot. So enabling autopilot again. So what happens now if we put in an address? Now I was not paying attention, so the car was complaining. So now I put an address in, and now you see on the screen that the blue line is now just a single blue line in the middle of the road. That means that we now have enhanced autopilot or navigate on autopilot. So now if I want to change lanes, I put on the turn signal, and without me doing anything or disengaging autopilot, it changes lanes automatically. And the car will do this automatically if a car in front of me is driving too slow, and now the car was suggesting me to go back to the lane, and the only thing I have to do is turn on the turn signal and the car will change lanes automatically. Sometimes it's slow and indecisive, so I'll just put the turn signal on again. Let's see if it does it. Nope. Let's do it again. This is not perfect. Navigate on autopilot. It's still in beta. So I'm trying to switch lanes back to the right lane, but I'm not sure why it's not doing it. Auto lane change unavailable. Why? That's interesting. So now I have to disengage autopilot and do the lane change myself. So as you see, these things are not perfect, enabling autopilot, and since I have an address in the navigation, it goes to navigate on autopilot with the thick blue line in the middle of the road. So that's basically the difference between autopilot and navigate on autopilot. Autopilot when you have no address in the navigation, but navigate on autopilot when you have an address entered in into the navigation. And as I said in the beginning, navigate on autopilot is part of the enhanced autopilot package. And as you can see here, I have no clue why it's going down to a different speed, going to 70. I don't know. Yeah, it wants to. Yeah, of course. Sorry about that. Since I put an address in, I didn't realize it wanted to turn down there because I have to turn around to reach my address, and it was slowing down to letting me know that I needed to turn. But autopilot won't do this automatically. I have to put on the turn signal myself. So let's see when I have the possibility next time to go out of this road and show you that I can put on the turn signal to leave the road. One thing here, you can see it's the same road, but still navigate on autopilot is not enabled. It's just autopilot now. I have no clue why navigate on autopilot suddenly gets disabled. There's nothing strange around here, but this has always happened on this stretch of this road. And then just a few meters or maybe 100 meters later, navigate on autopilot gets enabled again. Something in the map data probably. If you're wondering about all these messages on the screen, I have requested a service from Tesla to look into it. There might be something wrong with one of the sensors or something. And maybe that's affecting the autopilot somewhat, I don't know. But at least navigate on autopilot and autopilot are working. So there's one more thing that navigate on autopilot can do. It can take me off the highway, if you can call this a highway. It's a 2-lane road. So the only thing that I have to do when a lane comes up that I can get off the highway with, just put on the turn signal and the car will do the rest. But of course, when I'm off the highway, navigate on autopilot is not available, so I have to take over. But having autopilot is very convenient on long drives. You of course have to pay attention, but you're not getting as tired when you're driving. You can relax your shoulders and just enjoy the ride. There are two other things. When you are on autopilot, you will have automatic high beams, which I've shown in another video, which works really well now when we got the adaptive high beams. And also we will have automatic windscreen wipers that in some cases don't work well. So now I have to do this myself, going off the road because navigate on autopilot was not available. So I had to disengage autopilot and switch lanes myself. That's a bummer. Going back up on the highway and enabling autopilot again by double tapping, and now we have navigate on autopilot again, and now it's asking me to change lanes to the left lane. It doesn't make sense. There is no car in front of me. No need to do that. You should keep your car on the right lane. The left lane should be for those that want to drive faster. So here I can simply click here to cancel the lane change. And you can see now that navigate on autopilot will end in a few meters, and now it's ended. I don't know why. There is no change in the road conditions we have 2 lanes in the same direction, it should work. So as I said before, it must be something with the map data that is telling the car that Navigate on Autopilot shouldn't be enabled here. And as you can see, I can take my hands off the wheel for a short while if I have to do something, but you should always keep your hands or hand on the wheel and pay attention to the traffic and the road. Autopilot isn't perfect, and it's not driving itself, it's just assisting you driving. We have Autopilot, nope. Navigate on Autopilot currently unavailable. That's strange. Maybe it's something regarding the sensors, I don't know. But we saw that earlier in the video we had Navigate on Autopilot. So that's something strange. But at least you saw how Navigate on Autopilot works, changing lanes for you if you need to. Even though I didn't need to change lanes, I simply had to turn on the turn signal and the car switched lanes for me. Still have Autopilot on, and let's see how it does driving through the construction zone. It had a little bit difficulty earlier when the road markings weren't clear. We'll see how it handles it now. I'm also curious to see if it will now lower the speed when the speed limit is lowered by the signs around the construction zone. In my experience, these almost 3 years that I've had the Tesla Model 3, that Autopilot and the lane keep assist is working really well. It's keeping the car in the center of the lane. So now we get a 70 speed sign. Let's see what the Autopilot does. It read 80. I don't know where it read that, but it didn't. Well, now it was a little bit late in decreasing the speed, but I'm gonna manually decrease the speed here because Autopilot didn't do that automatically. So this must be some change in the software, because Autopilot did that previously. When you have a lower speed, Autopilot will lower the speed as well. And now it lowered it to 70. Very slow. Maybe on the 3rd speed sign. That's really strange. But let's keep it like that. Let's Autopilot control the speed. I'm gonna put both hands on the steering wheel now because we're approaching the spot where Autopilot disengaged last time. And now we have a 50 sign. Let's see what Autopilot does. Does it lower the speed or just continue on 75? Yeah, now it lowers it to 55. This is very inconsistent. Why didn't it lower the speed to 70 right away by the first sign when we entered the construction zone? That's really strange. But let's see what Autopilot does now. I think I have to disengage it. The lines are very unclear, and so it's maybe not strange that Autopilot can't drive through this construction zone, since the lines are very confusing in the road. So now we're out of that. Enable Autopilot again. It did enable it on 72 because I was driving at 72. And now it wanted to go to the left lane again. That's strange. It should keep itself on the right lane. So now the speed sign says 80, but Autopilot has not increased the speed, so I'll increase it myself. Very slow at speeding up to the limit that I set. I don't know why. Except for the construction zone, Autopilot did very well at keeping the speed and keeping the car inside the lane. So since I don't have Navigate on Autopilot now, if I put on the turn signal, I can't let the car do it automatically. So I have to disengage Autopilot and do the turn myself. And here we see that we can enable Autopilot, but it got this enabled or disengaged. We can enable it again. And let's see what it does with this turn. It's a little bit limited on how steep of a turn it can take. So maybe that was it in the first thing there. But I'm a little bit scared of the speed bump here, because I don't think Autopilot will slow down for the speed bump. So I will slow down myself on that one. And we can enable it again. We still have the gray steering wheel. It says it's 50, but we have a roundabout coming up, and Autopilot cannot handle roundabouts. So I have to disengage it again. So this was how you can use Autopilot and Navigate on Autopilot on my Tesla Model 3. And it's very similar on other Teslas. But on the newer Tesla models, where you don't have the stalks, you use the right scroll wheel to enable Autopilot. I hope you enjoyed this video, and maybe it was also helpful for you. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share. See you in my next video.